Hello everyone, it's me Jack. I wanted to do this as a PSA slash explanation of what is currently going on in the Hollywood system. Now for those of you that may live under a rock or may not really know all the full details, don't worry, I'll try to explain. The Screen Actors Guild as well as the Writers Guild of America have joined forces in order to tackle the Hollywood system as a whole. Seeing as it has been so corrupted over the years and COVID has basically become the default excuse as to allowing it to stay and become even more corrupted than it ever was. You have CEOs from Disney, Sony, Warner Brothers, pretty much every studio you could think of, namely all of them protected by the AMPTP, Alliance of Motion Picture Television Producers. Basically, think of them as the hitmen for unions representing the corporate entities that are these CEOs. Their entire job is essentially to gather up with these unions and give them the bare minimum as per the request of these CEOs. Problem is, it is beginning to start a downward spiral that is not only already affecting the entertainment industry as a whole, but it's going to affect everything within the entertainment industry going forward if it is not stopped here. So what exactly is the protest about? What caused this ripple effect for them to actually want to protest in the first place, or need to protest in the first place? Pretty much COVID was the exodus of it. Pre-COVID, you only had about 2 streaming services. You had Netflix, which was mostly movies, and some original content, but generally it was just movies. And then you had Hulu, which was basically rebroadcasting pre-established television and just allowing people to, catch up on films and TV that they haven't seen or that they want to see again. Think of them as essentially online versions of a streaming rental store. Rental stores don't exist anymore. It didn't really matter too much. But once the pandemic hit, all of the studios, which had already pre-planned to create their own streaming services to get in their own revenue, had found out that there was an actual loophole that once it transferred from physical media in theaters or on DVD to the streaming services, they no longer were required to compensate those individuals who worked on these properties. Think of it like the equivalent of you recorded a song, you put it on digital and put it on Spotify, and you also only put it on vinyl. But someone was taking your songs and putting them onto CDs and selling them individually and not compensating you, the artist, for the difference. And they were making more profit off of the CDs than they ever did for the vinyl. You start to see the pattern of why that's wrong, right? The biggest person that kind of was outspoken prior to us really understanding the situation was probably Scarlett Johansson. Infamously, she backed away from Disney after they decided to not release her movie in theaters, which would compensate her and pay her, and instead go straight to their new streaming service, Disney Plus, which would literally cut out the middleman of compensating her for royalties that she worked on. And the more that the strike has gone on, the more the toxic face of Hollywood has been unveiled. Now, we already knew that Hollywood had an extremely toxic side to it. I mean, hell, look at the whole Weinstein situation and how many years he's been in power. This was different because we actually got to see the inner workings of how the Hollywood system was actually screwing the people that were working in the system, namely the writers and actors, basically forcing them to work insane hours for little to no compensation, only getting paid per day instead of per hour, and on top of that, they weren't allowed to bring their work home, and they were expected to constantly be on hand, even if they're not working. Things like that, which just regurgitate the Hollywood system. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Why should I care about what the writers are going through? I mean, half of Hollywood's movies and TV that have come out are absolute garbage because they're just terribly written. Have you ever wondered why that's happening? Like, really, have you ever thought about why the writing is so bad? Now, I can't speak for every single project and every single thing that comes out of the woodwork. Let's take the example of Marvel and DC. Now, we, as collective nerds, have pinpointed things that may be nitpicky, like costume designs or actual character things that kind of don't align with how we see the model of the characters. That's kind of superfluous things that can kind of be hit or miss. A specific gender, race, identity, let's say things that are essentially marketing tools. Now, don't get me wrong, talking about these subjects is extremely important and things that we need to discuss in an open setting. However, to insert it into a thing that doesn't actually matter is forcing the audience to adhere to a narrative that you yourselves as a studio are trying to promote. Now, when you start doing that repetitively, it becomes repetitive, it becomes irritating, and it turns off your audience. And I don't necessarily blame the writers for this, because there's a thing referred to, especially in comics, as editorial mandates. Basically, when everything is about to go to print, and before everything is even really started ink to paper, the editor will come in and say, no, 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 no. The studios want blank blankety blank, and you have to fill in those voids. Hollywood is the exact same way. In fact, they are much worse about it. They want the cash cow before the cow has even become a calf. They want to invest in pre-established things. That's why everything in Hollywood is currently either a sequel or remake, or it is something that is just so overdone that we, the audience, just eat it all up because it's the same thing. They focus on an actor. They focus on a setting. They focus on a thing that we have seen 100,000 times, because originality in writing is not worthy of their profits. Or so they think. If you're guaranteed to get an X amount of dollars for everything that you spend, you're going to still spend that same amount of money. It's pretty basic math, and pretty basic if it comes to investing. The problem is Hollywood doesn't see people as people. They've proven that time and time again. In fact, as the strike has gone on, we've seen things that are just almost Orwellian. They want to digitally scan background actors' faces and digitally put them into these permanent roles and own their likeness for all eternity, which would basically make them permanently cardboard cutouts that they could put into any movie, anytime, whenever they want. Famously, there's actually clips of a movie on Disney Channel that has AI art versions of people, and they look horrible. But this is exactly the sign of things that I'm talking about. They want to use AI technology to replace the writers, replace the actors, because you don't have to pay a computer to be a computer. You do have to pay a human to be a human. You see a lot of Hollywood icons that should be there on the picket line. They don't need the compensation for it because they're already rich. And this is the key thing people don't understand. Not every actor is a millionaire. Not every writer has a credit for their work. In fact, that's one of the major things. Due to it going to streaming, almost none of the compensation or royalties are going to the right people. They're going straight to the owners of the companies, which is wrong. If you work at a job, shouldn't you be compensated for the work that you do? It's as simple as that. The Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild of America are asking for fair pay, reasonable work hours. The WGA doesn't even have a medical plan, which they should, because how do you have a union without really good medical? All of them are asking for the bare basics. And the stories that you hear of these actors and the struggles that they've had to go through because the system doesn't want them to have even the bare basic essentials for their job, which is required by their job employer. No longer are they taking the humanity into a factor. They're taking it out and instead pocketing it themselves. And the irony of Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, sitting on a private island for millionaires that he took a private helicopter to get to, doing an interview, wearing clothes that are probably worth more money than everyone at that picket line, telling them that what they're asking for is unreasonable. The Hollywood system doesn't want them to do anything. It wants to literally make them suffer. It's been leaked, the stuff that they've said, the stuff that they've done. Hell, they're so petty at Universal, they cut down the trees to prevent the picketers from having shade, which even went against LA's code for tree violations, and they're literally blocking off things like their walkways by claiming that they're doing construction when they're clearly not. Things that they are trying to strangle them from fighting. That's the whole point. And they're willing to let them suffer. They're willing to not only let them suffer, but they're willing to let everyone who busts their ass know, fall in line. And with the Hollywood strike, we've seen every other industry striking. Because this generation has learned from the previous generation what happens if you fall in line. What happens if you don't fight? You become complacent. And when you become complacent, nothing changes. In fact, it gets worse and worse. Now, there are some allies for the WGA and SAG, namely specific independent studios. And a lot of you may be saying, well, why don't they just all work at independent studios? Well, the harsh reality is, while doing research, I found out there's really not that many well-paid independent studios. The biggest one is, of course, A24, which has fully agreed to SAG and WGA's regulations and rules and have been able to compensate and let their employees work there accordingly. But the corruption goes a lot deeper than that, because these major movie studios actually own all of these independent production companies that we believed were suddenly speaking of indie culture for the people. Miramax, Touchstone, Dimension, all of these we believed were owned and independently operated, but no, they're actually owned by Hollywood systems and bigger corporations. And the problem with that is they have essentially cornered and monopolized the entire market of Hollywood, and it has become so corrupted that literally nothing can escape. The only things that escape are things that are either not seen as valuable or things that play out against the system. And trust me, there is a market for independent film. If we use the 2007 and 2008 writer's strike as an example, did you ever wonder why so many movies that came out that time were terrible? It's because of the writers being on strike. And what became a giant boom in that era? Reality television, game shows, foreign films, and independent films. Because none of those things adhered to the Writers Guild of America. So we, of course, went accordingly with those things. Because we, as an audience, seek entertainment elsewhere. In fact, the funny thing is, Hollywood doesn't understand that we actually use YouTube and Twitch far more than we do go to theaters. Far more than we do streaming services. In fact, Disney has oversaturated the market to the point where we don't even watch the shows half the time. Hell, half the time we just watch videos explaining what's happening in those series, so that way we don't have to waste our time, and instead we'd rather watch a guy who gets paid to watch it explaining what's good and what's bad, and then base our judgment based off of that. Kind of what you're doing here when you watch my stuff. Except I don't get paid to do this. That's the thing. I do this sheerly because I want to. And herein lies the situation I am dealt with. Though I am not part of the WGA or the SAG-AFTRA, I do fully support them in every regard. And many of the misinformations that are spread around, such as them demanding 18 to 20 writers per room per project, which is a lie, or them demanding to get paid just as much as Hollywood actors. These are misinformation that is actually spread through by the major corporations because, again, they're trying to stranglehold them. If they're willing to cut down trees to prevent them from having shade, and they're willing to literally have their entire likeness digitized, copied, and using AI technology, even though it is still in its infancy and it looks like crap, there's no lengths to the limit of Hollywood's corruption. So for me, as an individual, I see maybe in the future working with WGA or SAG members, or maybe becoming one myself. And they've made it very clear, if you stand against them, you stand against them permanently. And I don't stand against them, I stand with SAG and WGA. And so, going forward, I will still be able to do reviews as it dictates to their guidelines, which I will post below. Their direct guidelines of what I can and cannot do. I do not get paid for this. I do not get promoted by these companies. I do not get offered free things for talking about things. Because as soon as I do, I am now giving you a corrupted judgment. And I would never do that. If I'm invited to a Hollywood premiere in the future, sure, I'll talk about the experience of going to the Hollywood premiere. But I would still give the review in my wholehearted, honest opinion, regardless of whether or not it burns a bridge. Because unlike a lot of people, I will not compensate my own voice for any form of payment, be it financial or favors. And so, with that being said, I will still be reviewing going forward. However, I will not be promoting streaming services, companies, nor things that benefit the wealthy and powerful within the Hollywood system. Merely talk about the projects, my specific opinion of them, and give a rating. We'll talk about the actors. I will talk about the writing. I will talk about the production. But I will not, and I repeat, I will not be talking about the studios themselves as it pertains to the movies, to the projects in which I am reviewing. And I know that may irritate some people, but oh well. I've never been one to mince my words, and I've never been one to stagger over myself to please others. I do what I want, when I want, and how I want. That's this channel, and that's how I am. If you want to help the SAG and WGA strike, below is the Entertainment Community Fund, which helps these people that are struggling. Don't get me wrong, the writers especially are struggling to even pay their basic phone bills, to pay their basic things. And again, not every actor is a millionaire. A lot of them don't even have that much money, to be honest. I currently have yet to see any of the major Hollywood actors come into protest. I would love it for them to do that, and I know a lot of people in the picket lines would love for them to do that. Whether or not they do could make or break the system. And the thing of it is, the system needs to change. Not just the Hollywood system, but our economic system and our working system. Because it doesn't work. That's the thing. And it's time for a change. It's time for things to get better. And hopefully things get better for the WGA, for SAG-AFTRA, for Hollywood, for entertainment, and hopefully things go forward. And if this turns off a lot of you and you don't want to watch my channel anymore, okay. If whatever I say makes you go, I don't want to support this guy anymore, have at it. But if you do support WGA and you do support SAG-AFTRA, please share this video explaining to a quicker detail and spread the word. Support them. If you live near the Hollywood area, go by, give them some water. I'm sure they're really thirsty, especially in this heat. And that's all the time I got for today. Till then, see you next time.